Good morning, English 119. This is Grant, and I'm recording this video to hopefully get the kind of core content of what I want you to think about when I'm talking about critical data visualization. So underneath today's class in class 13, you will see a critical data visualization page. And I have a lot of questions here to help guide you to be more critical about the visualizations that you encounter in the world. So if you click on view material in here, you're going to see I have those questions and I also have this presentation here, which I'm going to go through right now to kind of better show you how to be critical of these kind of images that you see on the internet. Okay, so the first one, I'm going to reset this. The first one is about U.S. gun deaths in 2013. I know it's a little old, but the visualization is really unique. So you can kind of see the dot drops off when the person dies, and then the white continues, based upon a number of factors, how long they could have lived, right? And so, it's this scale and this speed that this thing happens that really gets its impact, right? It's really depressing to think about all of these people that died and all of these stolen years, right? All of these years they could have been alive. And so if you click on one point, you're going to see, their who they are, how old they were when they were killed, where they were killed, and then you see the other one where she could have died. She could have lived till 62 and died of infectious disease. Okay, so what I want you to start to think about is what is behind the viz of these things, right? We have a structure, right? Gun death by name, age, gender, location, date. We have gun deaths by age, and we're comparing the actual age of death to what we could have, what could have been the age, if not for gun violence, right? So, this is kind of an example of what we would call translation. So it's taking information that is informal and unstructured and making it fit into a rigidly formal and structured medium, right? Make it possible for a computer to read your sources. So, there's not a very good gun database about all of this information. So where did these people get this information from, right? And unfortunately, you have to take it from a variety of news sources online. Okay, so this is one of the sources of information that visualization uses, right? So you take this information that's narrative, right, and you're putting it in the database, right? And not all of these articles are the same, right? Some have missing information, some have more, some have less. But they're from a variety of sources, so they're going to look differently and do different things. But this is essentially, what this backside of the data of this visualization looks like. And that's why it's important to be critical. Like, where does this information come from? How did they get it? How is the data structured, right? So, we can look at they're concerned with this prediction of death based on when the person was killed, their age, where they live, the time, and the sex of the person. Okay, so once you have all this stuff, you're going to find a pattern and outliers in your data to make an argument. Right? Analysis is nothing new to kind of what we do as humanists. We are just swapping out flashcards and sticky notes for spreads and databases. A lot of the time humanists don't use this sort of thing, but I think using humanistic methodologies, I think, to look at this stuff is really important. Okay, so you got to think about what information is being used to make these predictions, right? And there could be some flaws with doing that, right? So when you're doing translation, there's often multiple ways that you can represent data. There's multiple ways you can classify or group together data. And so another example is this unique words used within an artist's 35,000 lyrics in hip hop. And so we'll close that one. So you'll see in this one, like you'll have different rappers, right, that have, you can click on their name and whatnot, and it'll show you how many, how many unique words they are working with. And you can kind of see in it the way that they're structuring the data. You can see region. Wu-Tang has a lot of unique words, so they're in their own category. So you can kind of see how the data is structured here, right? So you have an ID, who the rapper is, what region they're from, if they're not Wu-Tang or Wu-Tang. The cluster is just so you don't have like those dots sitting on top of one another. So you have different clusters. So this visualization looks neat rather than kind of messy. And then you have the amount of words, right? And so there's different things of standardization and classification, right? So standardize is you're trying to make an ID for everything so you can call it up later. And then you have those orange classification ones, okay? Another thing to think about is this British Museum's Google site. And, you're going to see all of these beautiful visualizations. And sometimes you really need to question, like, how much time do they spend on really thinking about it, and how much time do they spend, like, trying to execute this? So this was a partnership between the British Museum and Google. You can hear there's, like, intense music. But you can see there's stuff like this of, like, categories: art and design, living and dying, power, identity, religion and belief, trade and conflict. You have the organization towards the bottom of continent, and then you have time. So the things you want to start to look at when you're looking at these visualizations is, what's the methodology? Like, how did they get those categories on the right? Like, how did those work, right? What's the intended audience? How is the data organized? Like, you got to ask these questions in order to understand visualizations, because these pretty visualizations, their visual rhetoric can kind of, make them desirable, even though the underlying information might not be accurate. So I hope this video was helpful for you to start to think about how to read and pick apart visualizations that you find online. So I will see you.